The left brain, the ego, or is the ego more or less, associated with left brain? Yeah, more or less, I would say. It's we have to deal. I mean, I mean, the experiments with split brain psychology in the early days of it showed that your sense of you, my sense of I, is more saddled in the left brain than in the right. So, yes, it is ego, because who else? I mean, who else wants to deal with the world? Who else has to deal with it? You have to avoid the tiger. It's the difference between looking at the tiger and thinking how beautiful it is, and realizing I got to get out of its way before it eats me. So the right brain, if the right brain might just kind of groovy, and be eaten. The left brain. I mean, there's a story I tell in the book. Aldous Huxley, when he, famously in his book Doors Perception, his experiment with mescaline. He doesn't talk about left. Is that what you got there? Well, there we go. See? How did I know? How did I know? There you go. He doesn't talk about left and right brain, but more or less the description he's giving of his mescaline experience, I would say, more or less fits into the right brain kind of consciousness. But he says in there that if everyone took mescaline, there'd be no war, but there'd be no civilization either. No one would bother to make it. Now you may think, great, we don't need civilization, but I think that's a mis idea of early 21st century, post everything. Man, civilization's a good thing. It's got problems, but we need it. Yeah. But take it from me. But he also says, because on mescaline he looked at he talks about a sink full of dirty dishes. Now this gives us some idea how Huxley was living at the time. But he said they were too beautiful to wash. So they looked too beautiful. Why bother to wash them? So it's nothing wrong with the beauty. The problem is that the kind of sense of unity or harmony or at oneness or fantasticness of the psychedelic experience is at the cost of being able to act effectively in the world, as we all know. So I would say that's a good contrast between the two. Now, the problem is we jump back and forth between them. Most of the time we're in the left brain because we got to deal with the world, and evolution seems to have pushed us in this direction, in some way. But we do employ, rather crude means of getting out of it. And we even say, getting out of it. What are you getting out of when you say I'm getting out of it? Yeah. When you drink a lot. What are you getting out of? You're getting out of this left brain consciousness that deals with the world all the time, that sees it as, not even challenges, as adversaries. It has to do, and it's not bad. The reason the world is tough. The only reason we can be bored right now in the early 21st century is that people in centuries before us worked really hard to create this wonderful world we live in that we don't appreciate.
That's the word I was going to today, funny, appreciation.
Well, I'm saying, but that other mode that McGilchrist is talking about, that I was going on to at the end. That is the appreciation. Now the thing is, but when you're in that, you can't be bothered to do anything. So the point is, can we somehow get them together, get the left and right together, whatever, in some way. But I'm not as well versed in Islamic or Eastern philosophies, so I don't talk about them that much in my books, other than to repeat the cliches that the East is more geared towards the mystical or the unitive kind of perception than the West is more scientific and so on and so on. But I would certainly think that yes, there's more examples of the kind of participatory consciousness. I think in the main in Eastern cultures than there is in Western. It's more of an anomaly in the West, and McGilchrist himself talks about that in his book Mastering the Emissary. In terms of participatory in the sense of on-the-ground politics, that's a different thing. I mean, what I say in the book is actually, I'm trying to talk about this other more immediate ontological kind of participation of things, which wouldn't necessarily mean going out in the streets and hitting the barricades or anything like that, which is a different kind of thing. I even make not a dig, but I sort of draw the distinction between I'm not talking about occupying Wall Street, but occupying your mind. So it's a different kind of thing. I'm not necessarily against that, but I'm just trying to think of a different sort of way. Now I do think probably we're going to have kind of consciousness politics at some point. It exists already in some way. In a very broad sense, people that are people that recognize the value, say, of using psychedelic drugs as a therapeutic or some psychologically exploring method, they would like to be able to do that, not be, and the whole idea that your consciousness isn't yours to explore on your own, but I don't know exactly what form that's going to take. I mean, my own stance is more sort of keep quiet and let stuff happen and sort of just hold on to, there's a famous story that the American philosopher and scholar Ellen Bloom told about when he was teaching Plato in Cornell in '68 during the student riots then. And the students burst into his room and they were sort of saying, well, why are you teaching all this old stuff and it's not relevant? And he said, I cannot think of anything more relevant than studying Plato. So I'm more. It's never a bad time to pursue the good and the true and the beautiful. So that's how I am about it. But there you go. I talk about this experience I had. I had been reading a lot of Steiner. This is back in the late '80s and early '90s, and I've been practicing some of the exercises he gave in knowledge of the higher world and its attainment. I think it has a more sort of modern title these days, but that's the one he gave. And it's a variety of different meditative kind of things. But basically, Steiner's thing is based on Goethe's idea of the Earthlons, which basically it was kind of a way of just being able to, I don't know how to say, beam attention towards something. And it was, but it's not even that gives an idea of some kind of, it wasn't like that. It wasn't this kind of really, it's I don't know how to say. It's something that once you sort of find yourself doing. I'm going to start tripping over myself, but it's a way it's a way of relating to the thing where you're not trying to overpower it with your consciousness. You somehow what I felt that I was cradling it. I felt I was looking at a rose. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I just went out for a walk, and at some point I was, in a very sort of, I wasn't like every day I'm going to do my Steiner exercise. Every now and then I would do it and that kind of thing. But at this one point I was on this walk and I saw this rose bush and I looked at the rose and I just somehow felt very briefly that instead of just reflecting the rose, I somehow was, with my mind, or somehow was holding it in some way. And it was very different. It was a different feeling. It felt like a very different relationship to the thing I was perceiving. It was much more like a participatory one. I felt it with my mind. It sounds like a lyric from an old 60s psychedelic song or something, but it's true. So that's how I felt. So, and also, strangely enough, there's an English novelist. He claimed to be Welsh, but he was English, named John Cooper Powys, who wrote these fantastically long books, which no one has the time anymore to read, but I suggest you do. And there's one called Glastonbury Romance. He's talking about Glastonbury Way, head of Jean-Michel and Jeffrey Ash and other people like that. But he wrote a series of self-help books, sort of, in the 20s and 30s. But he talks about somehow forcing yourself to enjoy the world. You have to sort of force yourself to make it. And the reason he did this is he was someone who had a real strong connection to nature, but he found himself living in the urban America for a long time. He grew up down in Dorset, and nature was all around, all that kind of stuff. But for many, many years of his life, he lived in America, traveling on the trains. He sort of gave lectures on Dostoevsky in New York, but he wasn't built for that. His own nature was more attuned towards living in the countryside. But he said, he forced himself to enjoy what he could. So a patch of sunlight on a brick, or a cloud, or something like that. So living in LA, not going through quite the same rigors that Howie's was in, but it's not necessarily the most aesthetically beautiful city to walk through. I found myself trying to do that. I did. I practiced lots of different meditative kinds of things. I did the Gurdjieff work for a long time. I was into Crowley a long time ago. So I've sort of been at this for a long time. But I don't know. Maybe you just get a bit mellow as you get older. So I don't know if I could take looking at a thumbtack for hours. But it's a sense of Steiner talks about bringing more strength to your consciousness, more Kraft. It's a kind of very good German word. It's like, it's sort of there's a more oomph to it in some way, and I don't know. It doesn't mean sort of running around being wild or crazy. It's I don't know. Colin Wilson tells a story. I forget which Zen Roshi it is that says it, but one of the students says, sense or whatever. What's the secret? And he says attention. And he says, can you tell me something more than that? And he says attention, and then it sounds like a Marx Brothers routine. The answer is attention, whatever. So basically, I would say that's sort of what it is. So, my pleasure.